Welcome to episode 350 of the DFO Rundown presented by Bet365. Download the app today and use the promo code NATION, N-A-T-I-O-N, to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Of course, you have NFL playoffs tonight, 3 games in the National Hockey League, NBA. So get in and enjoy it at Bet365. I'm Jason Gregory. Welcome in Frank Seravalli. 350 episodes have flown by, Frankie.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who was our first guest? Do you remember?
Paul Maurice?
Yes, first episode. Then coach of the Winnipeg Jets. And amazingly, he sat out for a bit after that and has now won a Stanley Cup in another location, which is kind of how long we've been doing it.
Yeah. So any coaches who want to win a cup, feel free to join the show. So
yep.
There is lots to discuss. And man, the NHL doesn't have a lot of villains, Frank. It doesn't have a lot of animosity in the regular season very often, but oh my goodness, the Flyer faithful and their team sure made Cutter Gauthier know that they weren't happy about his decision.
What a night. I mean, that I circled it on the calendar back in the summer and said that that would be one of the 10 most interesting days of this season. And there is zero doubt that it was. And look, on so many different levels, you know that I'm intensely proud to be from Philly. And more than just the response to Cutter Gauthier and the pride that the Flyers players had in standing up for their organization, it was just really nice to see a jam-packed arena for once and a true vibe, because I mean, it feels like 10 years since the Flyers have really played meaningful hockey. And I know they've made the playoffs a couple times since, but it's the interest level in this town has been waning for a while. And I don't think people around the league properly appreciate just how far the Flyers have fallen in the relevance scale in their last 12, 13, 14 years. It's been a long time since they had something to play for. And that's why I really appreciated John Tortorella's comments after the game when he said, look, I don't get involved in that crap. He said, I just want to play games like that in this building that mean something. And January 11th against Cutter Gauthier and the Anaheim Ducks, it's not going to mean shit. He knows that. And I think the fan base knows it. But I think it was also an eye-opener and a reminder to the Flyers players, some of whom have been there a long time and have seen and felt what it was like to experience that way back when. Sean Couturier, the longest tenured and definitely the one that understands it the most. But Travis Konechny's gotten a sense of that, and he tried to or offered to fight Cutter Gauthier. It just, that was really what sports to me is all about. It was in good, clean fun. Like, and I know Cutter Gauthier may not have liked some of the things that were said about him or whatever. He made his choices, and he acknowledged before and after the game that he did what's best for him, and good for you. But don't think that you're going to stonewall an organization, force a trade, not respond to calls from management, head coach, team legends, all of whom tried to get in touch with you, and then turn around and try and blame it on the media. It's not how it's going to work. So he got a little taste and knew what it would be like. And he was able to slink away after that. The Anaheim Ducks got walloped, and that was that.
Yeah, Philly, that was, you could tell they were emotionally charged. Like, really, it's like, I know they won in the seeding round, Frank, but I don't really count that as a playoff series. The last playoffs with fans was when they beat Pittsburgh in 2012, right? In the opening round. Then they lost, I think, to the Islanders in the second round. Like, that's the last time they've won an actual NHL playoff series. And, Philly's always been an emotionally charged place. And I think you're valid on your points about how, the Flyers for the long time, like, Flyer fans cared, like, they're proud of the team. And you know what? They had, they haven't won in the cup in a long time. They had some really good teams, went to the cup final in 2010. I look at where the organization is now, and like, you look after that game, it's a great game and everything, but then you look at the standings and they're still like 14th, right? But they're probably where you want them to be, Frank. Like you've said all year long, they're better off being near the bottom and getting a higher pick than finish and get pick 11, 12, 13. That doesn't do them any good, right? So it's actually maybe helping them that the other teams are better, but you're right. They got to get back on track. And I don't know if they're that close, to be honest.
It doesn't feel like they are. And I think that's why over this 12-year period of time since winning a round in non-COVID times, that the fan base that was diehard and passionate has, I guess, largely gone apathetic. So many other places to spend your money. Yeah. And I feel like they just weren't getting their value. They weren't being heard either. And it's been these like fits and starts of, well, we're going to rebuild and then we're not. And then we're kind of one foot in the water, one not. It's been all over the place. And I think more than anything, they're just looking for direction.
Yeah, no, they need it. And so, but for one night, man, it was fun. Like Cutter Gauthier is allowed to say, hey, I don't want to play there. I have no problem with that. But I've always tell people, when you make a decision, there's still consequences for your action. Even if it's the right thing for you, there's still consequences to your action. He'll be fine. Like, the Ducks responded with a big win the next night in Carolina. So, that's fine. It didn't crush him, but I think that's a galvanizing moment for the fans and their players. And I'm sure Konechny, if he wasn't, his fan favoritism probably ratcheted up even more because he knew the situation. At that point, the fans wanted to see a tilt. And some people thought, oh, we shouldn't be wanting fighting. I'm sorry. Right. Travis Konechny's not a heavyweight, right? The chances of that fight being anything of real significance where somebody gets hurt would have been very, very rare.
Yeah, but Cutter Gauthier didn't oblige. That's the thing. And he just
but that adds to it. That keeps him being the heel, right? Like he was a heel. The fans hated him and now they hate him even more. He played it perfect.
Did he? Or did he just not have the juice?
Oh, maybe he doesn't have it, but it extends it because this is not going to be a one-time thing. That's what's good about it. Like this is going to last for a few years. Every time the Ducks come to town with Cutter Gauthier, it's only once a year, which makes it a little bit easier to get ramped up for. Like, I don't think the emotion and the energy in the building next year, Frank, is going to be any different, probably until maybe Gauthier fights one of the Flyers. And maybe he does it in Anaheim to piss off the Flyer fans even more.
Yeah, I don't know. No, I agree that the level is going to be ratcheted up. I just don't know that he's necessarily going to be part of it. We'll see.
Yeah, you could be right. And that just keeps the fuel going. And I think in a regular season at times, like hockey forgets it's best when it's high emotion. And it's hard in 82 games. You're not going to have a ton of emotion, but you need it every now and then.
There's so little of it most nights. And I hate that.
Yeah. You need some, right? And you need some of it because when you see it now, I think people are like, oh, this game's actually a little bit more fun when there's a little bit more emotion in the game.
Everything about Saturday was what Philly's supposed to be, what Flyers hockey is supposed to be. If you want out and you don't want to be part of it because you're too big for it, that's the response that you get. And yeah. I miss that. That's what my whole childhood was like. Yeah. Standing up for the place you're from.
Yeah, I get it. I think that's awesome. And
by the way, some big Flyers news this morning though. They're set to announce here in the next hour or two that they're building a new arena in South Philly in conjunction and joint partnership with the Philadelphia 76ers. So, kind of surprising in the sense that the Flyers just finished a $400 million renovation, 400 plus million, almost $500 million renovation of Wells Fargo that was supposed to sort of carry the building into the future. And now a building that opened in 1996 is going to be on its way out.
But they're not going to tear it down. It's still very serviceable.
They're gonna tear it down once the new building is built right next door.
Really?
And it's going to be details were scarce this morning on timeline, but sometime in early 2030 or 2031. So 5-6 years from now, they'll have the new one up and they'll take the other one down.
I always hope that the new rinks have an atmosphere, right? And not, I get that everybody likes the luxuries of the restaurants and all that stuff, but it really takes away from the ambience of the building.
We'll see. I mean, apparently this is supposed to be incredibly advanced, and I think there's a lot happening in the South Philly sports complex It sounds like at some point in the very near future, the Eagles are going to build a new stadium. It's kind of unlike any other place in the continent where you've got everything clustered right there. Philly's ballpark,
Yeah.
Eagles stadium, and then now a multi-purpose venue for the Flyers and Sixers and concerts. It's just I know anyone not following, it's a massive turn because the Sixers had gotten formal city approval and had gotten all their funding lined up to build their own new arena in Center City downtown. And they had expended a lot of political capital and money to do so. And now all of a sudden they turn around and make a deal with the Flyers and Comcast to go joint venture, which was always on the table. So it's going to be interesting to hear the about face, but another new arena coming to the NHL in short order.
Well, it probably makes sense to partner up, I would think, right? From a cost perspective.
Well, I just think this is why I said it in my tweet. I think this is a massive change for the Flyers and the future of their business. I mean, look, the entire landscape is changing. If you had to try and stay in Wells Fargo Center by yourself as a one-tenant operation, and then on top of that, so you lose a bunch of dates in the arena that you own because the Sixers leave, but then you're competing all of a sudden for concerts and shows and ancillary revenue with the new place that the Sixers open. I truly don't know how economically viable it was for the Flyers moving forward. They'd be losing a massive chunk of their overall revenue. I'm thinking 30, 40, 50% with the Sixers and half the shows out the door.
Yeah, well, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense that way for sure. We're going to get today on the pod. We're going to play a little matchmaker as we are just under 2 months away, just under 8 weeks, in fact, from the NHL trade deadline. But before we get to that, I want to talk quickly. You look at the Eastern Conference, Frank, and that wild card race. It's Boston, Columbus, Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal, the Rangers for sure, the Penguins, Islanders, Flyers. I don't know, but those other teams like the Red Wings. Let's start there, man. They've won 7 in a row. So I put the question out on Twitter yesterday. Was Derek Lalonde like that bad for that group? Because it's stunning. Like, I know they lost their first game with Todd McClellan, but since then they've won 7 in a row and they beat some really good teams. And yesterday they absolutely mauled Seattle. Like, what do you make of this turnaround here for the Wings?
Well, I think it's just been an energy that's been contagious. I'm sure there's a structure part of this, an element that's in there as well, but they look and feel like a totally different team. They look like a team that's gotten some confidence and swagger back. Now, I think that's to tie in the trade deadline, though. That brings us to a really interesting juncture if you're Steve Yzerman, right? They've won 7 in a row. They're squarely in the mix now after being at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. How big of a swing do you take? Because they're at the end of the day, they're still a flawed team.
Yeah,
I still don't think they've got the defense necessary to compete. But I don't think that's fixable over one deadline period. Of course not. But is there something that he could do between now and then to dramatically improve this team's chances?
I don't know about dramatically, but I think if he wants, like if you can go out there and you can always get, Frank, a third pair D-man that's not going to cost you a boatload, that can be an upgrade for your team. It adds a little energy in your dressing room without, the Red Wings aren't going to push all their chips in. It would make no sense to me. But, you take 5-10% of your pile to get a D-man. And you know what? Who knows if maybe that helps you to the point that you shock someone and win one round. Right? Because
he had that guy in Oli Mata and gave him up for a 3rd round pick. And look how good he's been in Utah.
Yeah, well, dude, hey, look at Wallman in San Jose. Right? Like if you look at their evaluation of defense, like you can question, are they going to be able to bring in the right guy? That's totally valid. So I think they have to look at that, but I don't see them take it a huge swing.
How about something more low key? How about just fixing your penalty kill? They've given up the 2nd most power play goals against in the league. If they were able to just cut that number in half, they'd allow 7 to 8 fewer power play goals against just in the first half of this year. 7 to 8 fewer power play goals against. I'm guessing that amounts to 2 to 3 wins. Is that fair or is that an exaggeration?
Oh no, I think that's probably valid. And just
that's the difference of playoffs and not 2 to 3 wins right now.
Yeah, and their penalty kill hasn't improved under the new coach because it's only 70.6% in their 8 games. Like they're winning games despite an atrocious penalty kill, right? And so that's an area of concern, 100%. So you have to look and say, okay, is it system? Is it players? It's probably maybe a combination of both. You might have to change something. And when a coach comes in, I remember a coach can't change everything right away. You probably pick one or two things that you can, okay, these are our biggest areas of concern. We'll improve them. Then when they get a little bit more practice time, they'll start to work on their penalty kill. But you can't change everything. And obviously the penalty kill is a big problem, but it's also one, like sometimes you got to change personnel, Frank. And that's one thing. Like some guys are just better penalty killers than other players. They just are, right? And they don't necessarily fit into a lot of other places on your team, but they might help your penalty kill. So I agree with you. That's the one area that, long term, it's going to be hard to have success if your PK is hovering at 70%.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's an easy fix, but there are good penalty killers out there that you can find.
Yeah.
In addition to the structure changes.
The Columbus Blue Jackets, I think everybody's kind of expected waiting for them, but like Zach Werenski just continues to have an unreal year. Marchenko, they got a lot of other guys. They've won 4 in a row. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. Like the Blue Jackets are showing no signs of slowing down.
They're not, but again, another interesting deadline conundrum if you're Don Waddell. Do you just sit back and enjoy the ride? Do you make a move because they deserve it to try and add and get in this most unexpected of seasons? Do you sell off and say, hey, the long-term plan is still the long-term plan?
Yeah, I don't think you can sell off. I think that'd be the wrong message to your group. Like you never want, hey guys, we care more about the future. Like you can do both. And because who do they have? Like Sean Corrali's a UFA, Matthew Olivier's a UFA.
Like Ivan Provorov is a massive piece to the market.
Yeah. Like he's the one guy that I guess they could consider. Now, the other thing is, Frank, remember,
how do you do both though? Like how do you trade Ivan Provorov and still sell to everyone that you're trying to compete?
What if you trade Provorov rather than just for prospects for a player?
What contending team would want to do that?
Well, what if it's a third pair guy for a second pair guy and then you get a pick? Like you're getting maybe a lesser player, but you're still getting a player. Because lots of teams,
you might as well keep him and sign him at that point.
Yeah, well, that's
you got the better guy, and he's expressed the desire to stay.
Yeah. So I the other thing is they've got extra picks, right, from the Urasek trade. So if they want to just tweak and add one small thing rather than sell off, they could do it and not like hamper their future.
Does that make sense though? What if they don't get in?
Well, I guess you have to look at it. It's how much do you believe in your team and where are we? Like, I know it's tight right now, but in 7 weeks, what if there's only 3 teams battling for 2 spots realistically, right?
That's so unlikely to happen given where we're at in the standings.
Yeah. Well, maybe 3 short. What about 5? You know what I mean? Like somebody's going to fall off. It's not,
I don't think so. I think we're going to have this absolute, it's not a turtle race, but it's a
jog.
No, it's a cluster is what it is. Really. Like you have 2 good weeks and you're back in. Like we can't really, I personally don't think we can really officially declare some teams dead until March. Unless you're already willing to say Sabres out.
Yeah, Sabres, I think they're too far. They're 10 points behind Boston. They're 9 behind Columbus. That's a lot of points with 6 teams between you. Because even if you have 2 good weeks, then you need all these other teams to have crap weeks.
That's exactly what's been happening. They've all had crap weeks.
Well, no, Columbus, Detroit, and Montreal have been great.
Detroit and Montreal are up.
Yeah.
Columbus, they're up. But a few weeks ago, Montreal and Detroit Montreal was right with Buffalo.
No.
Remember the Sabres lost to the Canadians and that's how they jumped ahead of them. Montreal was in 5th. They were in 16th place in the whole conference.
Because even if Buffalo would have gone 7-2-1 in their last 10, they'd still only be at 41 points, right? Instead of 37, like closer, but not that close. Like I don't Buffalo know. And man, I think the Penguins they're on the escalator down for me. I don't see him staying in the race. I don't think they have the juice to do it.
Okay. I'm not. Yeah. I'm closer to that, but that's one team.
What about the Islanders?
What about the Flyers or the Islanders?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a believer. I'm just saying it really, the story of the East this year is 2 good weeks and you're back in it. Because we just pointed out the Red Wings, they made their coaching change. They were 15th in the conference.
Yeah.
The Canadiens were 16th at Christmas.
So if you had to pick today, is there any team that you like? You're like, I think that they'll sort things up.
I want to say the Ottawa Senators.
Yes, totally agree. They had a huge weekend for them. To beat the Dallas Stars, winners of 7 in a row, playing your goalie both nights and back-to-back, that was a huge win for them yesterday.
I want to say the Sens, but I want to know more about Ullmark.
Yeah, backs are finicky, man. Backs are a finicky issue. So
I can't reasonably say that I think they're going to be it's going to be the Sens that get in until we know more about Ullmark.
Yeah. Well, the 2 teams I like are Columbus and Ottawa. I don't know if they'll get in, but if I had to pick today, those are the 2 teams I'd pick. Columbus, they got a lot of guys producing, right? Columbus looks a little bit like Seattle when they made the playoffs, right? Like,
so are you saying Boston out?
Yeah, well, I didn't pick Boston at the start of the year, so I got to stick with that.
And we didn't mention the Penguins or the Rangers.
Wow, the Pens, I think, are on the way out. The Rangers, they have the most skill, Frank. Like, they should not be in this position, but something's just awry there. Like,
yeah, they looked a little better over the weekend. They had way more attention to detail this weekend than they did previously.
Yeah, like of all the teams, like between the Rangers, Penguins, Canadiens, Red Wings, I would take the Rangers for sure. If like they're 2 points back at Pittsburgh, they got 3 games in hand. I like them
got
more.
One of the best goal differentials. They've got far and away the most regulation wins of the group.
Yeah,
19 regulation wins. The Bruins have 14.
Pittsburgh has 12.
I think the Rangers get in. I really do.
Like that's the Flyers
I would pick.
The Flyers have 10 regulation wins, Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a fun race. I'll say that.
So that's the thing. The Flyers are in 8th place in the Metro. And we're saying, oh yeah, I guess they're kind of still in it.
Yeah, I don't think.
How outrageous is that?
Yeah. And the race in the West is really for the second wild card spot today. And it's the Canucks, the Flames. Flames had a big win over the surging Kings. And then I think the Blues they're still in it, but they've played more games, so that makes them look closer than they are, right? Like their points percentage is 500 compared to 573 and 571. So they already have fewer points and fewer points per lower points percentage. And those games, and Vancouver and Calgary each have 3 and 2 games in hand. So it's not looking great right now. The Blues are going to have to go on a run. They can't continue to just go 5-4-1 every 10 games. Not going to work.
The West is so much more.
Well, the race is the race is for the seedings, Frank. That's where the race is.
I'm going to say is defined the right word?
Yeah, the top 7, I think everybody knows, but you don't know where they're going to finish, right? Like Colorado isn't locked in to be for sure the wild card team, right? They could catch Dallas or Mini.
And you're not ready to bet on the Canucks?
Well, if I had to put money down today, I would still put it on the Canucks. I think they got the best roster of those teams. Like Vancouver over Calgary. I give Calgary credit that they're hanging around. Now, Vancouver's had injury problems. They've had some guys not producing, but like JT Miller had a big game the other day. Pettersson's last few games look better, right? They get Quinn Hughes back. That's obviously a huge addition to their team. And so I do think Vancouver, if you ask me today, who would I bet on? I'd still put, with 40 games left, I'd still put my money on Vancouver over Calgary or St. Louis, or I guess Utah, if we want to consider them. But like Seattle's not in it, but Nashville, San Jose, Chicago, they're not in it. So there's definitely fewer teams in the race.
So if Vancouver, let's just play along with your theory. If Vancouver were to get in, could they be a live dog in round 1? If healthy. I think that's the true caveat with the Canucks.
Yes, if healthy. And who's the matchup? I think we saw last year, like, I don't think if you look at the matchup last year, Winnipeg got steamrolled by Colorado. It just wasn't a good matchup for them, right? Like, look at Winnipeg whole season. Look at this year. They had 5 games against a team that was just a bad matchup. So certain matchup teams are better. For Vancouver, who's a good matchup for them? Between LA, Edmonton, Vegas, and then really, if they're a wild card team, they could still cross over, which, I don't want to repeat it, but we all know it's a stupid rule. If you have 4 and 4, there should be no crossover. It should just stay in the division. But anyway.
Well, right now they would not. If the standings are what they are and it ended today,
they would take on Vegas.
They would take on Vegas.
Yeah.
Which is Vancouver or Vegas a good matchup?
For Vancouver,
I don't think so.
Yeah, not a great one. No, like I think
they're probably overwhelmed in just about every part of the game.
Yeah, I think Vancouver matches up best against Winnipeg.
Why Winnipeg?
Because Winnipeg is like Winnipeg. They can play sound defense for sure, but they're still. I think Vancouver's top end talent, if they're all healthy, is better than Winnipeg's top end talent.
That's a
like Hughes.
I don't think you're wrong. So like my gut reaction to that is you're correct, but does depth beat top end talent?
Potentially. I like that third line in Winnipeg. Is that probably what you're talking about? And I would agree, right?
Yes.
Like that third
and
line.
What happens if Winnipeg could get a second line center? Like
there we go.
I like Nemesnikov.
Hey, buddy, I think that leads us to our next segment where we're going to play Matchmaker. Because boom, I was looking at teams that are really good teams. And I don't know if there's a top 10 team, Frank, that we look at and say, man, that's a real big need. There's one that's close, but I think Winnipeg and a second line center, that could be the difference for them. And I think it's crucial that they go get one.
Yeah. So let's bring in Tyler and do that I don't want to save him till the end because everyone likes the segment. So we'll do Tyler and then we'll get to the Matchmaker segment.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. New edition of Fill in the Blank brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. I'm happy you did this because I got a trade related question to throw you guys right out of the gates. I'm sure you'll talk about each of these guys, but there is a blank % chance that the Sabres move both Byram and Cousins before the deadline, Frank.
30% chance?
Ooh. Is there one guy you lean more towards than the other?
One guy I would move, or I think they would move?
You think they would move?
I just think there's been so much more interest in Cousins. Not to say that there's not interest in Byram. I think they've gotten so many calls. Teams are so curious about could we take this guy and reinvent him? Could we get him back to the level he showed as a 21-year-old? It's hard as a 21-year-old to score 30 goals and nearly 70 points. And he's done it. It's just, I think that's an absolute conundrum for Kevyn Adams.
That's fair. Greg's percent chance they move them both?
Well, I'm going to say low. I'm going to say like 10%. I think those are hard trades to make in season. Your younger players, like, you traded Middlestad for Bowen Byram, and then now you're going to flip Bowen Byram right away. Like, you can't just flip him for prospects. It makes no sense, right? Then
why isn't he signed? That's my only question. He had an opportunity heading into the summer, extend him, didn't happen. And then how do you, let's say you're Kevyn Adams and you're sitting here going, all right, I'm looking at the future of my blue line. I've got Power, I've got Dahlin, and I've got Samuelsson, all signed to long-term deals, all very expensive.
Yeah.
Where does another $7 or $8 million to Bowen Byram fit in?
Well, I just don't know. The number one mistake rebuilding teams make is they give away legit NHL players for draft picks who have a low percentage chance of becoming NHL players. Oh, we got 2 seconds and we got a third. Okay, let's do the math on the chances of those guys actually panning out. And even if you have great scouts, they don't all pan out. So I think Buffalo would be, if they're trading those guys, they got to be trading them for NHL players in return in similar age. Otherwise, I think it's a mistake.
Can the Sabres afford to spend $31 million on 4 defensemen moving forward?
For the time being, I think, because they don't have a lot of they don't have anybody else who's up for a big contract anytime soon, right? All their big guys have signed. So you sign that, I think you can do it. And then you just got to fill out the rest of your roster. Because I think you want to there. I think Buffalo has underachieved a little bit this season. Now, maybe a little bit's even a stretch, probably a lot. But here's the question that goes back, Frank. Do they have the veteran people in their management who have the experience to make this decision? That's my concern in Buffalo.
I'm going to ask that another way. Can the Sabres afford to? Should they spend $31 million a year on a defense core that has played as poorly as it has? That's the better question.
Yeah, that's fair. I would still lock them up, because if you have them locked up in term, there's always teams like Bowen Byram. I don't think is going to get a contract that makes him grossly overpaid, right? So then teams are always looking for D-men, and if they got a D-man at term who's young, right? Bowen Byram is really young. What is he, 23? Right? So you even lock him up for 6 or 7 years, unless you have to grossly overpay him, he's always going to be a tradable asset because of his age and his talent and cap security. I would do it if I'm Buffalo, because you can always move one of those guys, Frank, if you have to if you find out you need more offense.
Well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe you are keeping Byram and trading one of the other guys.
Yeah. But I'm going to say low percent chance. I'll say 10, Ty.
All right. I got a Western Conference question for you guys. You sort of hit on it with Vancouver in the 8th spot right now. I know technically not by points percentage, but I wanted to ask you guys between Calgary, St. Louis, and Utah. I want you to rank them. So their best chances of making the playoffs, it goes blank, blank, then blank. And then I'll give you guys what Bet365 actually has on their updated playoff odds boards. But Greg's, I want you to rank them: Calgary, St. Louis, Utah.
I'll rank them right like that. 1,
Really?
2, 3. Calgary 1, St. Louis 2, Utah 3.
Interesting. Frank?
Utah, Calgary, St. Louis.
So Calgary has the best odds to make the playoffs on Bet365. They are plus 230 to get in. Utah's at number 2, plus 260. And St. Louis actually is a distant third at plus 850, which I found pretty interesting considering, they have talent. That group's made the playoffs before. Plus 850 for St. Louis, plus 260 for Utah. Are you kind of surprised by that gap? Or do you think St. Louis is actually a distant third?
I think St. Louis is.
You had them above Utah.
No, he had Utah first.
No, I had Utah, Calgary, St. Louis. I had St. Louis third. I don't know what. It's obvious that Doug Armstrong thinks they're a playoff team. He made the coaching change. He made the Cam Fowler trade. I'm not seeing what he's seeing. I don't think this team is anywhere near as good as he does or other people might, but that's just my view.
It's fair.
It's hard to argue, man. Like the results, you are kind of who you are. And the Blues are just a middling team. They got, they're below, they're basically a 500 team, but really they've only won 20 of 44 games. So to me, you're not a 500 team. You're 500 points percentage. You're not a 500. You got to win half your games in my books to be a 500 team. They're not.
I hope we can abolish the idea, by the way, of 500 points.
Yeah, it's a point. That's why
no one should ever talk about that again, because to get in the playoffs, you have to have a minimum of 575.
Yeah. So
being like, oh, they're a 500 team, that's embarrassing in today's NHL. It's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think the Blues are that good. And you're right, Frank. Now maybe he'll change. Maybe as he gets closer to the deadline, he'll be like, hey, you know what? My team is not a playoff team. And they could be a seller, because I would argue they probably should be at this stage. Now they don't have a lot of guys.
But that's the thing. Who would anyone want to buy on that team? Yeah. I'm not again, not to oversimplify it, but let's say you're St. Louis and you want to offload pieces. Who
they'd want to buy, Frank? You know who they'd want to buy? Cam Fowler, if the Blues retain some salary.
He waived to go there though, right? Or were they just on his list?
No, he waived to go there, and he has a very limited no trade.
Yeah.
It's only a 4-team acceptable list, and he's got term.
Well, he's
One
got
more
this
year.
year plus next year, right? So if you got like, I think Cam Fowler, even at $3 million, teams would be being like, yeah, I'd pay. Or Nick Leddy, right? One of those two. They each have 2 years left, so you'd get him for basically, 2 Stanley Cup runs, which is I think what lots of teams would rather do. So I actually think they have some value there. Now, do the Blues want to retain salaries? A question mark. Like if they're not going to retain 50%. That's I guess I shouldn't say never because Toronto was able to convince when McCabe, they got him for $2 million. That's not a real deal, but I don't think the Blues are there. But even if they retain $1 million, that's still a $3 million player for Fowler or Leddy. I think they got a lot of value, don't you?
Not really.
You don't think Cam Fowler at $3 million would have value in the league?
How much different is it?
But they only got a second for him as it was. And you already had Anaheim retain 2.5, and that went on for months. Am I missing something? Like, no, Cam Fowler is not going to have extra increased value by retaining $1 additional million. You
said he had maybe because he was very picky on where he was going to go.
Right. So then the pickiness still applies because he still has the contract.
So Nick Leddy has more value then.
No, Nick Leddy, that's the problem with all of the guys on St. Louis's blue line is they all have no trade clauses.
Fully too, not even a list.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. So pick another guy on this team that you think has interest. They've been trying to move Brandon Saad.
Oscar Sundqvist would have some. You're not going to get a huge return, but
what are you going to get for Oscar Sundqvist?
Yeah, not like I said, you're not going to get a lot of return, but you asked who has interest. Interest and return are two different things, right? Like teams would have interest in him. You're not going to get a big return.
He's a fourth line player with 3 goals.
Kills penalties, wins faceoffs. Those guys always have value, right? What is he?
Value,
a 1
I mean,
1.4, 1.5. I got to look up his cap hit, but I think
1.5. But I'm just let's establish a hypothetical that they're gonna move guys. I'm just not seeing anyone beating down Doug Armstrong's door.
What about Colton Parayko?
Well, that's different, and they're not. They've basically said they're not trading Colton Parayko.
Yeah.
If they trade Colton Parayko, what are they gonna? They got to pack it in. He's playing 24.5 minutes a night. He's the only guy they have that is a needle mover, in my opinion, on their blue line. It's Parayko 1, Philip Broberg 2.
Yeah.
Then what?
Up front they don't. Yeah, they don't have a lot of guys that they got so many guys on long-term contract. Like the Blues, if you look at their roster, Frank, they're not much different than the Islanders. When you look at their long-term, how they're going to build their team. But honestly, they got Broberg and they got Holloway, right? And they didn't have to give up a lot. So those moves have helped, but they got so many other older guys tied up who aren't producing lots for long-term.
Well, I said the Kraken are the Islanders in the West.
Well, So
maybe you're right. Maybe this is the better, more applicable.
Yeah. Well, it's probably both because you're right. They got a lot of guys under contract for long terms they're not getting better, right?
Just tell me what the path is.
Yeah. No. So they think they can get in, but I'm with you. And so they have them like 800. Now, the one thing I will say about the Blues, just small thing, the NHL this week, I don't know if you noticed it, Calgary and St. Louis are playing 2 games.
Yeah, really weird.
Tuesday. No, I like that. I wish they would do this more. You go on a road trip, you play the same team 2 days in a row. I think it builds animosity. It saves on travel for your players. There's so many more positives than negatives. I wish every team would have like 2 of these. You can't do the whole season. I get it. But I think we should see more of these situations where you play 2 games on the road. Obviously, East and West can't do it. I understand it. But you can do it Atlantic and Metro and definitely within your own division. And you can do it Central and Pacific. And I think each team should have 1 or 2 of them. I just think it builds some animosity. And if we talk about the fatigue factor and they're always worried about players' health and stuff, well, now you're just saving a little bit of travel, right? Your Calgary's going to stay in there for 3 days?
Yeah, it's just an accident.
Yeah.
It's just a matrix conundrum that they had nothing else they could do.
There's a few of them I've noticed around the league that do it, that happens, and you're right, it's probably not planned, but I think they should really look at it. I think it'd be better.
What an episode. Number 350. We got our daily schedule porn from Jason Greger. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's true though. You're
They-
not disagreeing with me.
Well, this one I was an oddity that I looked at and was saying that's weird.
They did it during the pandemic season, and I thought it was cool. Okay, last one I got for you guys. This will tie in nicely to your matchmaker, I think. But in the Metro, those top 3 teams, Washington, New Jersey, Carolina, they've kind of all gone through their ebbs and flows this season. Right now, they all have only 5 wins in their last 10 games. So no one's like running away with this thing right now. Although Washington does have a bit of a lead in the points percentage. But I wanted to ask you guys, the Metro team that needs to make the biggest move or needs to be the most aggressive at the deadline is blank, Frank.
Probably New Jersey. They've been aggressive. They don't need to be extra aggressive. Like, think about the way Tom Fitzgerald retooled that team over the offseason. It was massive. But to go from where they are now to like truly feared cup contender, I think they've got another level to get to. I'm not saying they have to, also because their window is just opening. Like that's the tough part if you're Tom Fitzgerald, is to manage that of, hey, we got a team that could be good for a long time here. What's the appropriate level of aggressiveness at this deadline? It's the same thing the Hurricanes have been asking themselves forever.
I got to say Carolina, because if we're talking about a big splash aggressive, and it's the hardest splash to do, but they need a difference maker. Look at Marty Necas. Marty Necas has come back down to earth. He had 39 points in his first 20 games. You know how many points he has since then? 11. Right? Like he's
in how
not
many games?
11 now in his last, what did I say it was? He had 11 and 19.
Wow.
Like that's a massive. This guy's up here.
He might not even smash his career high.
Yeah, like he's got 50 points in 44 games right now. But at the rate he's going, he's not even going to be a point a game guy. So, and he's never really shown that he was a huge, over the season. Like he had a great start to the year. It was unbelievable. He was up there with McKinnon and Kucherov, and he's outscoring McDavid. And you're like, what the hell's going on? This is great. But it's come back down to earth. And Carolina, to me, if they don't get a difference maker, guys, they're going to have the same story in the playoffs.
Interesting stuff. I'm sure you guys will hit on a few of it in your matchmaker segment, but that is a wrap for this week's edition of Fill in the Blank.
Like, honestly, Frank, if we look at Fitz for a guy who scored 100 points and Miller or Pettersson, and it's a big if, they ever make that deal, Carolina is the one team that should be looking, because that's what they need.
I think Carolina is looking at Pettersson.
Yeah.
They were before. Remember that was the threat.
Fit.
That was the threat that signed this deal, or we're trading you to Carolina. Like they had something apparently that they liked and were close to.
Yeah, well, that makes sense to me, man, because that's what they need. If Carolina doesn't get it, Frank, they don't have the top end guys to match up against New Jersey or Washington.
I know it was a rumor if you want to play matchmaker again, but we can maybe start with this one. What about JT Miller in Boston?
Oh, yeah, I talked about it last week. Yeah.
Has it ever been more apparent that Boston just absolutely needs that number one center?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Pavel Zacha, fine player, but
yeah,
that's he doesn't have the makings of a number one center on a cup contending team. Just doesn't connect.
No. And it's not his fault. I never blame the play. Pavel Zacha is a really good NHL player. He's just not a number one center because it's hard to be a number one center.
And Lindholm isn't and never was, I don't think.
No. Yeah,
I think on a good, he's a 2.
Yes.
And he's clearly a passenger, not a driver. He's someone that can play with good players and he can put up numbers, but he's not going to drive your team. So now what?
Yeah. Well, those Boston and Carolina are the 2 teams that if Vancouver does consider a deal, it's out. If you're Vancouver, you get them out of your division, you get them out of your conference. They're on the other side. Carolina, I think, Frank, has more pieces to offer back, though.
Carolina's got a ton.
Yes.
They've got a reserve list as long as the day is long.
And Vancouver doesn't want to just get young guys. Like they're going to, well, younger, like they'd want some legit NHL players, right? Because they're a team that, like, you got Quinn Hughes, like you feel you can compete. You're not just going to say, oh, let's get a bunch of young 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds and draft picks. I don't think that's where they're looking at all. And Carolina has a lot of those NHL veteran players, good players. They're not one-on-one as good as Pettersson, but you could offer up a few.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So who's in your matchmaker game?
So I looked at a few. I'm trying to look at guys who I thought would be interesting for teams. I want to start with Yanni Gourde. And Yanni Gourde isn't a top line player, maybe not even a second line player. But I think Yanni Gourde for certain teams, Frank, is going to give you an element you really need. And I think Toronto and Colorado are two teams that would be perfect fits for Yanni Gourde.
I could see him being a fit in Minnesota if they don't get Brock Nelson.
Yeah, I got some other guys to mini. So, but yeah, I could see that too. Well, he fits the style of Bill Guerin, right? But I think Mini has enough of the elements that Yanni Gourde brings. Like they got a lot of tenacious players.
Yeah, I mean, I think he makes a ton of sense in Colorado.
Yeah.
What about Yanni Gourde in Winnipeg?
Is he a second line center?
I think at this point he's a third, which is maybe why.
And they might have the best third line center.
Yep.
Right. Like Winnipeg might have the best third line center in the league right now in Adam Lowry. So, because I thought about them too, but I'm like, no, Winnipeg's got to shoot higher. I'm not sure there is that many better offensive guys like Brock Nelson, and you outline in your trade targets. He's having a real down year offensively, but he's been could a change get Brock Nelson back to where you think he is? Then he makes more sense for Winnipeg.
All right.
Because I agree. Like the Jets, the Jets need a number 2 center.
I agree. I think when you look at Gourde, I think his play and production is definitely way more 3C than 2C.
Yeah.
So you're saying Winnipeg needs to aim higher.
Yeah. And that's why I look at fits, but Winnipeg's got an unreal number 1 and an unreal number 3 center. I love Scheifele as a center. Really, he's having a great year. Probably not getting talked about how good of a year he's had. Right. And he's another guy that you're like, how is Mark Scheifele with 25 goals not on Team Canada? What the hell's going on? But then you look at Adam Lowry, like who doesn't love Adam Lowry? He can play tough minutes. He's big, he's strong, chips in enough offensively for you. God, like every team would love to have him, and he's great in the room. He's a good leader. Like they just need a number 2 though. Problem is, do you think there is a number 2 center available? That's like, imagine JT Miller in Winnipeg. Woo.
Is Brock Nelson is it too?
I think he's the best option. I would agree.
So then, okay, let's do Nelson then.
Yeah, I have Winnipeg's the number 1. I don't number 1 for sure. Colorado would be close too.
And you have Mini on there?
No, I didn't have Mini.
Oh,
you have him there?
Yeah, I just think there's the connection's too strong. Minnesota kid and the Four Nations, and they're definitely interested. So that makes a lot of sense. What do you make of Lou Lamoriello though saying last week, "Oh, we're not in sell mode"? I know that's, I guess, what you say when you're trying to tell your team that you're competing, but it's also just not in his nature.
Yeah, but if you look at them, he's loyal and maybe to a fault in believing that this group is good enough. They're not good enough collectively as a group to make the playoffs.
Not even close.
Yeah. So some of those, and that's right now, Brock Nelson. I agree with you, Frank. I think Brock Nelson gets out of there and goes to another team. He's going to have more success than he's had this year. Brock Nelson's had a lot of really good success personally the last few years, but this year they're not. And I don't think it's going to change. And they've got to make some moves. Like Brock Nelson, I still think has value. Like Kyle Palmieri, the way he's playing, Frank, I'm not sure he has any value at his cap hit.
I just think there's enough teams that have cap space that could do it. And you're forgetting about third-party brokers. I think there's plenty of value.
Okay.
Did players like Kyle Palmieri's cap hit move in recent years? Of course they did.
But how much do you think you'd get for Kyle
You're
Palmer?
getting a second-round pick.
Okay. And then you're retaining. So if it's a third-party broker, then you're retaining 50.
You can get up to 75%.
Yeah. So you'd have 25 for a second. Yeah, you'd probably do it. Why not at that point? But I like Brock Nelson for sure for Winnipeg and Colorado. Now I wanted. What about Trent Frederick? Because I looked at him and like I had Minnesota. I think is a fit for him. We know Bill Guerin, the type of players that he likes. And I looked at a team because he's a pen and UFA. I think the chances of him re-signing there are high. And I think that's always something I include because I think teams, you don't want to give up a lot for just a pure rental. Some do, but I think if you could avoid it and, re-sign a pen and UFA, it always helps you for certain teams. And Minnesota, you know what? We know they got all their cap space. It's freed up next year as the buyouts come off the books. And I know Brock Faber's contract kicks in. So but they still have lots of new money. And I just look at the style of team that Bill Guerin builds. I think he'd love Trent Frederick there.
So what about Utah? And what about
well, if Utah is trading for Frederick, they would probably ask to negotiate first, right? Like they're not in a playoff spot yet. I don't think they're going to be giving up assets for a pen and UFA unless they know they can re-sign him.
Well, I think you bring him in and you try and sell him on it. So Utah, but I think if you noticed that in Tyler's question, I ordered my playoff chances. I think Utah still has a strong chance to get in. I think they're going to have enough runway from John Marino and Sean Durzi getting back that's going to drastically change that team's fortunes.
But I think the Dylan Guenther injury crushes it.
We don't have a timeline on that yet.
Well, did you hear their GM? He said it's going to be long, not too long, but that sounds like at least a month.
Yeah, but that's right in line. You're talking like mid-February likely with Sean Durzi and John Marino both being back. That's plenty of runway to get in. Well, I still think Utah is going to be a buyer, not a sell. They're definitely not going to be a seller. Yeah. I don't know how big of a buyer they're going to be, but I think they're going to try and reward their team with every chance that they get. They've got too many picks. They can be a player without having to really cut deep into what they're looking at.
Well, the advantage they have is other teams do right now. Anybody who you say is out a month, you really get 6 weeks because the season, that a month puts you right into the break of Four Nations. So you really get until the 22nd, right? Which is 6 weeks. So, you have a guy you claim for, you're really getting 6 weeks of time where he doesn't miss any games. So that's a benefit, I guess. I don't know. I just don't know if Utah is going to be close enough. But I think, Frank, if Utah might be a team that says, hey, if teams are willing to trade guys and we can get them and sign them now, we'll just kind of get ahead of free agency.
What about Vegas?
Oof. Well,
got some optionality there because, Frederick could, if you needed to, in a pinch, could play center. I think they've got one of the better bottom sixes in the league with what they squeeze out of those guys. But if they could have Frederick added to that group, that might be exactly the type of move that Kelly McCrimmon would make.
Yeah, he would fit. They don't need him at center. Like Brett Howden, your third. Brett Howden's having a great year.
Right, but I just mean it's nice to have optionality in case you have an injury that pops up.
Yeah. Well, I can't rule out Vegas almost on anybody. You're right, because there's not necessarily an organization that's more aggressive. Who would have thought they were going to get Hurdle last year, right? And Hannafin. They'll take big swings. There's no question. I'm looking at Vegas. They don't have any guys though, Frank. Like last year, we knew Marcia, so I guess their goaltender and Aiden Hill, that's who they're going to have to re-sign, but they don't have any other big name UFAs, right? Like Victor Olofsson, whatever. So it's going to be maybe a little bit of cap issue moving forward. Now that doesn't change that they might just force a guy out and say, hey, we're trading you. They've done it before, but Vegas is going to do something, Frank. I just don't know what. I just don't think it'll be as big as what we saw last year. Obviously not.
I don't think they need to either.
No, they're good. Yeah.
They're really good. And they may be the best team in the league. Maybe someone like Frederick is just a nice little exclamation point.
I think they could use, though, like a top 6 winger. Like you look at Eichel, Stone, Hurdle, Barbashev, Carlson.
I called it a middle 6 winger.
Yeah.
I just did my Eastern and Western Conference objectives. I called it a middle 6 winger for Vegas.
Okay,
And
that's fair,
I
yeah.
wrote wingers. It could be multiple.
Yeah, because
What if you got a couple guys that weren't expensive?
Yeah, because I think they could use somebody with a little bit more finish on their second line wing in an ideal world.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to get, but if we're talking utopia, that's what they'd want. What about Ryan Lindgren, Frank? Because if the Rangers, you've talked about, you've outlined it, like you look at his contract status, how the negotiations have gone. The Rangers, I don't know what they're doing, but if they're, if they're still 7 points out, come and that's why this one's a big if, because if they're back and they're right there, then maybe they don't do it. But if they aren't, I think Ryan Lindgren, we all know defenseman at the deadline, you have value. He's a pen in UFA. He can kill penalties for you. He can play top 4 minutes. He has for a long time. He's not a top guy. Like he was a really good complementary partner with Adam Fox, right? For a long time. They worked really well. So what do you think of Ryan Lindgren? Do you see a fit?
So left shot defenseman.
Yeah.
I wonder about Detroit.
Yeah.
Is he that big of an upgrade, though? That's the question I'd have to ask. And I don't know how big Detroit is going to spend to the conversation we were just having about them.
Yeah. Because right now, Edvinson's their second pair lefty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like stylistically, you know who, if he shot the other way, he would be an unreal partner in his style for Quinn Hughes, right? Because I still look at Vancouver, and I think Vancouver has to find a way where when Roenick comes back, he can play in a separate pair, and then they have 2 really good top 4s, 2 pairs in their top 4. That's what I think they need. Right? Like I would argue even Vancouver could use him, right?
No.
On their left side.
He's the exact opposite of what Vancouver needs.
Well,
he doesn't move the puck well enough.
But don't you think he's better though as an upgrade over Forboard or Brisebois?
Yeah, he is, but to what end? Like I'm not giving up assets to do it.
Yeah. I don't know. Solid number 4 defenseman, man. I think they're really valuable.
What about Florida?
Oof. Yeah, they lost 2 of their top 4D from their cup winning team, right?
Well,
in Montour and Oliver Ekholm-Larsson.
Not only that, but just look at the goals for, goals against. The Panthers, of any of the teams in the top 6 in either conference, so the top 12 teams in the league, they've given up by far the most goals of any team in that mix.
Yeah. Because you look at their D right now. Nate Schmidt, Nico Mikkola, Bjorn Fort, Belinsky's, like their back end isn't great past their top guy. Now Aaron Ekblad's out, so I guess
he's day to day, but that just highlights for me the need that they have.
Yeah, because even Kulikov is then in your second pair.
It's not right? That's not ideal.
But they probably need more of a puck moving D man, right?
I think enough of those guys move the puck. I think they need a little more bite, but
yeah. A guy
Lindgren is a good playoff guy. I know fans hate when I say that, but
no, it's valuable, man. You kidding me?
That guy's a warrior.
Yeah. Well, now here's another guy, Frank, because we talk about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and remember when Oliver Ekman-Larsson in Vancouver, people, he's done. Right? He's brutal. He was a number 1 D for a long time. He went to Vancouver and it didn't work. He goes to Florida. He was unreal for Florida. Ask any he was probably their best defenseman in the playoffs last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then talk to people in Toronto. He's played really well. Now this guy was never as good as Oliver Ekman-Larsson, so I'm not comparing him as far as a top pair guy. But what about Ristolainen in Philly? Can Ristolainen on a good team be a second pair right D for you?
Not for me.
No, you don't think what don't you like about him? Because does he look worse being on the team in Philly who's not that good, or Buffalo who's never been that good? Like, what could he look like on a good team?
I think he is what he is. I think he's a big defenseman with limitations who's not even really physical.
What about you think? How does he move the puck in your eyes? I think he's not an elite puck mover by any stretch. Decent puck mover.
I just don't like the term. I don't want 2 more years of him after this.
What if they're retaining?
It's like, I don't know.
Because he's 5.1. Let's say they'll retain 40%.
He doesn't move the needle for me. I don't think he makes your team better, but that's just my own opinion.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is, there's not a lot of right defensemen available. And I wonder if at retention for Flyers, depending on what they get, would that be a consideration? Because you're right. He's big. He skates pretty well. He hasn't, like, sometimes I think when you're on a bad team, like,
but when you're traded for what he was and you are what he was supposed to be, isn't he supposed to come in and make you a better team? He's never made any team better.
Well, yeah, but at the teams that he went to, like, you're asking for a miracle worker. Like,
no,
Philly
he's not. He doesn't. Again, if the needle is here, dead straight, and then you go and you trade top picks for him, he's supposed to move the needle. The needle is still dead straight, not a needle mover.
So do you think now would be the time? But don't you think you could buy low then?
No, because they want a lot for him. They see the market and they say, oh, well, reasonable cap hit, has term, relatively young, big guy. They're not sitting here going, oh, let's sell him for cheap. That's not their thought process. So no, I don't think you can get him out of there for cheap. I think you're trading a first round pick all day long. Plus, where do I see it? Not really jumping out at me. Do you have a team?
Well, I looked at a few. I actually looked at Florida as one. And
they don't have any cap space, and they also don't have any assets.
Yeah.
They don't have a first round, second round, or third round pick this year. Their first round pick next year is tied up in 2026. Like I'm not where's Florida going to get assets to spend and cap space?
That's totally valid. I'm just talking fit for the team. The one team who needs a second pair right D, everybody knows it's Edmonton. Now, is he a fit in Edmonton's the question. But they want more size in their back end. He would play with Darnell Nurse, who's playing great this year, right? And whether Darnell Nurse plays with Troy Stetcher, whether he plays with Brett Kulak, he's been very good, right? He's big and mobile. And if Philly's willing to retain, depending on percentage, 25 to 40, I think Edmonton would look at that. If Ristolainen comes in at 3 to 3.5 all of a sudden, and you get him for 3 years, I don't think that's a horrible trade for him to consider. Just when I look at the options for a right D, and I think that's what Edmonton needs. Like they're a good team. Edmonton's really good, but make no mistake, that's their one glaring hole. That, and they need a little bit more grit up front, but that's their glaring hole. They need a fourth line center for sure. But that to me is their big hole. And I'm not saying he's the best. If Matheson's available, he can play the right side. He's a left shot D. He's obviously better. But if none of those other guys are available, then I think you have to look at that because Edmonton has to upgrade their second right D.
Okay. I would ask any team making the move, how much of an upgrade is it?
Well, on Edmonton, though, you think it's an upgrade on Stetcher? You don't think so?
Stetcher, yes, but Emerson, yeah.
Well, Emerson's playing 13 minutes a night. He's been perfect in your third pair, and he's like your number one penalty killer. He's got a really good role, right? Really good role. But I don't think they want to elevate him to play way more minutes just yet, right? He's only played like 70 NHL games.
You asked, I answered.
Do you see a better or other options for them other than Matheson? Because obviously he's an obvious one. If he's available, that's someone they'd look at.
Not jumping off the page, no. I had this discussion with Tyler on his show last week.
And I have one. Here's a guy who's not a big name, Frank, but he's having a really good year. He's a pending UFA, doesn't make a lot of money. Ryan Donato, currently in Chicago. And, I look at Tampa Bay, and then I looked at Colorado. Not going to cost you a lot. Just a depth guy who right now, the guy can score.
He has been so consistent. I have so much respect for Ryan Donato as a total pro. He has without much fanfare, not huge money. If you were to look at the Blackhawks roster, there's maybe 2 guys that you could say, outside of Nick Foligno and probably throw in Connor Bedard, that you'd say have lived up to what this season should have been. It's Donato and Jason Dickinson. And that's it. So, he's been good. He's found a way to create when there's not a lot out there or available. And I think he's a perfect bottom 6 addition to a team.
Yeah. I think in Tampa Bay, I was looking at their bottom 6. Tampa Bay always makes moves, man. They always make moves. So I wouldn't be. Now, here's one other guy in Chicago, Frank. He's got 1 year after this. What's your thoughts on Connor Murphy? 6'4", right defensive, not overly physical. He's a little physical, but when you look at teams and the need for a right shot D, he's another guy. Stan Bowman obviously was in Chicago. He would know him.
Yeah, that I could see that one making sense more so than Ristolainen. I think Murphy's just a low maintenance player.
Yeah, I think he'd have value for a lot of teams.
Oh, I do too. And I think if Chicago was willing to retain, I have no reason to think that they wouldn't. That if you were to package, let's just hypothetically say package Murphy and Donato or Murphy and Dickinson, you'd solve a lot of teams' problems in one shot.
Well, Dickinson, yes. I think, center, defensive guys.
And retain. But you got to retain. And no reason why you wouldn't, but I think you'd solve a lot of teams' problems right there.
Yeah. Edmonton doesn't need Dickinson as a center. They got Henrique, but the Connor Murphy one for Edmonton does make a lot of sense for sure.
You don't think Edmonton, you don't think they need a center?
Well, they do, but even if you retain on Dickinson and you've got 2 more years, right? Because he's still over $2 million. I just don't know if Edmonton has enough to spend as a 4th line $2 million center.
Yeah.
Right. I think like for 1 year,
I still think they have to improve at that position though.
Oh God, yes, 100%. Like McCarron in Nashville makes a lot of sense for Edmonton if Nashville's willing to do it. He's $900,000, right? Big body, physical, can skate, decent defensively. But I think they will try Noah Philp first and at least give him a look. But I think they're always looking for a veteran. And ideally they want a right shot center because they got, certain defensive zone draws. You want a good righty. Like Draisaitl's good in the draw. Henrique's good in the draw. Even McDavid's, all their numbers are good in the draws, but they need a right shot center for sure.
Have you started the Matt Savoy countdown clock until when he's getting called up?
To me, it shouldn't be till next year.
Oh, well, it's happening. And he's been excellent. Unbelievable, in fact.
He's been great for a month, which is awesome. But where's Matt Savoy going to play in your team?
It's going to be in case of an injury.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not saying forever, but I'm saying once he gets called up and it's an injury, I don't know that he's going back down.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know. Because the only way
metrics have been so good in Baco.
Yeah. The only way he plays on your team though is if he's on your second line with Draisaitl. And I'm not sold that right now today is a 20-year-old heading to the playoffs. Draisaitl, everybody who watches him, his line's better when he's got a good forechecker. Mm-hmm. And that's not Matt Savoy's biggest strength. So I think Matt Savoy long-term, where he'll fit in Edmonton is he'll fit on with McDavid more than he would with Draisaitl, I think, to be honest. Really heady player. But Edmonton's in win now mode and a 20-year-old rookie.
I'm not saying he's the answer. I'm just saying he could be a contributor.
Yeah. I think Noah Philp gets called up before Savoy.
Okay.
Yeah. I would. Do you have anybody else that you think is an obvious fit for one team?
No. And I'd say we have 8 more weeks to figure it out. And I wanted to wrap today's show by just giving a little love to Eric Stahl and the Carolina Hurricanes. Awesome to see his number raised to the rafters in Carolina. It's such a huge part of that franchise and all that they've accomplished. It's hard to think of the Canes without Eric Stahl. And so good to see him and his family back in Raleigh. He had
a really, really good career, man. Like his his second year when they won the cup in 06, like 100-point player. He was over a point a game player in the playoffs that year. Like, I know some people say, well, they didn't have a star. Eric Stahl was a star that year. You can't say he wasn't. He was a dominant they didn't have a star defenseman, but he was a legit bona fide top line guy. No question. It was only his second year. I don't care. You're a 100-point player.
There was a period of time when the Stahls ruled the NHL. They're just did. Good.
Yeah. Like Jordan Stahl is, for a long time, like in Pittsburgh, he was an outstanding number 3, but he actually played more number 2 minutes in the regular season because Malkin and Crosby did play a fair amount together. But yeah, Stahl, he had that one unreal year for them. And he was just a good, like Jordan Stahl is what Adam Lowry is now. Is he not?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Big bodies, chip in enough offensively, win faceoffs, kill penalties, right? Yeah, do it all. So yeah, Jordan had Jordan's had a little bit of a run here lately for them too. He had a hat trick the other day, but yeah, Eric Stahl had an unreal career and was massive for that franchise, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. Jordan Stahl's just getting all the points that Marty Necas used to.
Buddy, that's a crazy, like honestly, 39 and 25 to 11 and 19. That is a big difference. And that's why I was telling, like early in the year, hey, it's great, but maintaining, that's why points per game, like when a guy has a good first 30 game, oh, he's on pace for this. It's just a projection, people. Until you've done it historically, I never get too excited about guys having a great start unless they're McDavid, Kucherov, guys who have done it year after year. So we'll see. Have a good one, Frankie. We will talk to you on Thursday. That's the rundown, as always, presented by Bet365. Use the promo code NATION, NATION, to get in a wide range of markets.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.